Welcome to the How-To section of the Wilwood Disc Brake website. In this video, we'll show you how to install front and rear disc brakes on the 2011 Ford Fiesta. Begin assembly by bolting the hat to the rotor through the back side of the rotor using the supplied washers and bolts. Coat the caliper bolts with Loctite 271 and thread into the hat. Using an alternating sequence, torque the rotor bolts to 25 foot-pounds. Remove the lug nuts and lift off the wheel. Remove the screw from the bracket that holds the original rubber brake fluid holes and slide apart. Disconnect the OEM brake fluid holes where it connects to the brake hardline. Temporarily cap to minimize fluid loss. Using an impact driver or breaker bar and socket, break the caliper mounting bolts loose from the back side of the rotor. Remove the stock caliper. Using a coat hanger or piece of wire, suspend the caliper until the brake line is ready to be disconnected. Remove the caliper mounting bolts and slide the rotor off the hub. Insert a sleeve into each of the caliper mounting holes. Coat with Loctite 271 and then slide the caliper bracket mounting bolts with washer through the OEM caliper mounting ears from the inboard side. Install the Wilwood caliper mounting bracket to the OEM mounting ears on the outboard side, making sure it fits squarely against the mounting ears. Tighten and torque the bolts to 60 foot-pounds. Slide the rotor registration adapter over the axle register against the hub face with a larger OD facing inward. Install the hat rotor assembly over the hub assembly, making sure it fits flush against the axle hub flange. Temporarily secure with 3 lug nuts. Coat the inlet fitting with Teflon tape and screw into the caliper with 90-degree angle in the up position, parallel to the length of the caliper. Initially place 2 shims on each bolt to reside between the caliper mounting tabs and the bracket mounting ears. Mount the caliper onto the bracket so that the largest pistons are at the rotor exit end of the caliper in relation to the direction of the rotor rotation. As you view the rotor through the top opening of the caliper, check to make sure the rotor is centered in the caliper. Adjust as necessary by adding or subtracting shims between the bracket and the caliper mounting tabs. Once the caliper alignment is correct, torque the bolts to 40 foot-pounds. Insert the brake pads into the caliper with a friction material facing the rotor. Secure by sliding in the pad clip retainer. Connect one end of the flex line to the previously installed caliper fitting. Slice a grommet and slide it over the Wilwood stainless steel flex line. Slip the OE bracket over the flex line and reconnect to the original location using the OE bolt. Remove the clip of the brake hardline and disconnect the factory flexible line. Immediately connect the Wilwood flex line to reduce spillage. Tighten until snug and reinstall the clip. Secure the line as necessary to prevent contact with moving suspension, brake, or wheel components. Install the wheel and torque the lug nuts to manufacturer's specifications. Begin assembly by bolting the hat to the rotor through the back side of the rotor using the supplied washer and bolts. Using an alternating sequence, torque the rotor bolts to 25 foot-pounds. Remove the lug nuts and lift off the wheel. Break loose and remove the hat locator screw using an impact screwdriver. Slide off the drum from the parking brake assembly. Remove the bolts holding the axle hub, lift off and set aside. Disconnect the OEM brake fluid holes where it connects to the brake hardline. Temporarily cap the line to minimize fluid loss. Remove the clip that secures the other end of the brake line near the drum brake assembly. Detach the line and lift off the drum assembly. Disconnect the parking brake cable from behind the drum assembly. Remove the anti-lock sensor from the back side of the drum brake assembly backing plate. Place a shim between the sensor and the backing plate and reinstall. Using a hose clamp, squeeze the fingers of the retainer down in order to slide the parking brake line out through the hole in the bracket. Apply Loctite 271 to the 2 bottom OE axle bolts and reinstall the hub using the backing plate align pins. Torque to manufacturer specifications. Slip 2 mounting bolts along with washers and spacers through the lower holes of the flat hub mount bracket and apply Loctite 271 to the bolt threads. Install the bracket onto the axle hub base with the countersunk holes in the bracket facing outboard. Make sure the bracket fits squarely against the axle hub base, then tighten and torque the mounting bolts to 45 foot-pounds. Slide the caliper bracket mounting bolts through the ears of the flat bracket from the outboard side. Initially place 2 shims between the flat bracket and the caliper mounting bracket. Apply Loctite 271 to the caliper bracket mounting bolts and install the caliper mounting bracket to the back side of the flat bracket. Tighten and torque the mounting bolts to 45 foot-pounds. Install the rotor registration adapter over the axle register against the hub face with larger OD facing inward toward the hub face. Install the hat rotor over the axle hub assembly. Secure with 3 lug nuts to keep the hat rotor in place while continuing with the installation. Slide the brake pads up into the caliper from the bottom with the friction material facing the rotor until the V-spring clip snaps into place against the anvil. Assemble the caliper inlet fitting and screw into the caliper. Lubricate the caliper mounting studs with lightweight oil. Initially place 2 shims on each stud between the caliper mounting bracket and the caliper. Mount the caliper onto the caliper mounting bracket. View the rotor through the top opening of the caliper. The rotor should be centered in the caliper. If not, adjust by adding or subtracting shims between the caliper mounting bracket and the flat bracket. Once the caliper alignment is correct, secure with the provided washers and lock nuts. Tighten and torque to 45 foot-pounds. Connect one end of the Wilwood flex line to the caliper fitting. Route the line along the same path as the OEM hose and connect the other end of the flex line to the fitting at the brake hard line. Secure line is necessary to prevent contact with moving suspension, brake, or wheel components.